This is Dean with my campaign to improve the environment. I begin with my personal story. Back when I was in California, of waking up one school morning and seeing a bit of smoke outside, and then eventually school got canceled after the day after that, and that cancellation extended for 2 weeks because the smoke within the state got so bad that they made announcements to not go outside. During that time, a forest fire, the Camp Fire specifically, which is caused by a power line that ended up catching a forest on fire, it spread from the forest to the city of Paradise, and that was a wave of destruction. I was watching the news where there was planes and helicopters dumping fire retardant material on the town, and it did nothing. The entire town essentially was consumed by the fire. And it went on, and there was smoke in the air for nearly a month. It was devastating to watch. Why does California burn? Why does it have to be like this? Well, basically, California has a lot of forests. And the reason that forests have such bad fires is because once forests reach their fully mature state, and like the really big trees are just growing and growing and growing, they leave behind debris with like the dead branches and leaves, and those just build up at the base of the forest. And when it reaches a certain point where there's enough of that really easily flammable material there, if a fire does start, it will burn way too intensely, way too hot, and it'll spread so fast that it even consumes like the large trees themselves, which are most of the time, those big trees are very resistant to the flames themselves. They'll often, in the case of small fires, it'd be almost entirely unscathed. And so if a fire reaches a critical point, or the forest reaches a critical point, it's almost impossible to put out the fires. And this is not a one-time event at all. I'm going to talk about the Camp Fire again, that one example. That did $16.5 billion in damage and ended up having hundreds of people, ended up killing 85 people and injured hundreds. The fire that happened this year, 2025, from the start of January and has been continuing to cause effects into February. That one in Southern California, or those many fires down there, have ended up dealing an estimated, currently I didn't put it on here because it's not absolutely certain, an estimated like $200 billion in damages, and killed an estimated 23 people. And on top of that, there's a reported over 100,000 calls about fire-related disasters were made to the state. That's a statistic from CAL FIRE. The state itself looks like this, or looked like this during those fires. This cannot be happening in the future. This is people's entire lives being completely washed away in a sea of flames, and it's just unacceptable that we end up at this point. What needs to change? There's two main changes. The first is that we need to get rid of trees that are next to power lines and next to very, very important things like that can catch them on fire. And the other change is that we need to do controlled burns. For the power lines thing, PG&E admitted themselves that the power lines that they had were the cause of the Camp Fire and were too close to trees and ended up starting that forest fire, which led to the houses being burned. And also, even in like my own neighborhood, or the neighborhood next to mine, there's an area where there's a bunch of spruce trees that are less than a yard below the power lines above them, and they just keep trimming them back every couple of years. And if anything were to happen to those power lines, or there'd be strong winds or anything like that, there's not a single chance in my mind that those trees would still be standing after that. They would 100% burn. Same with the like entire neighborhood next to that. The other thing that we need to change is we need to do more controlled burns in California. The way controlled burns work is you take the forest where before it's built up too much of the debris at the bottom of the forest and it's too intense, and you burn that forest. Most of the time, a large majority of the trees will still survive that forest, and as long as you do a control burn and you ensure that you make a line around the control burn where it can't spread past and monitor it while it's burning, we should result in a forest that's been reset and cut back in the amount of debris there, and it should be more resistant to fire in the coming years and not build up to this point where it's catastrophic, like we often let it do. We currently have some programs in place for both of these, but the rules are really strict, and fixing that in legislature will be the best solution for fixing these issues with fire. Now, for a quick breakdown of what I've listed, the cost to file an initiative to California is $2,000. It's undoubtedly much more expensive and much, much more variable in price for the amount of money that we'll need to spend revising and changing and like doing other things related to that. So I decided not to include it, but it would be because it's so variable. So the other money for this Kickstarter that would be spent on things besides actually passing the law is on outreach. Getting people to know about this is important, and I'm absolutely sure that with the recent events that have been happening and the history of fire, that people are more on board than ever onto like doing anything we can to prevent it. So for the actual cost to enact the policy, these will be on the state. The changes to the power lines and like the trees around the power lines, that currently rests and will probably in the future continue to rest on the actual companies themselves, like PG&E or Roseville Electric. Those companies are responsible for trimming the trees and just having slightly more intense restrictions for like how much they need to ensure that their power lines are not close to trees, would help with that one area, and that wouldn't be directly on the government themselves. For the controlled burns, I got a source from the California that said that essentially there was an average of around $103 or $108 and something cents back in 1999 for how much it costs to burn an acre of forest with a controlled burn. That was the average cost. I adjusted that for inflation, adjusted that for what the percentage of land that the state itself is in control of, so the state wouldn't be overstepping their bounds at all and going onto privately owned property. And for the government to control that area and make sure that there's controlled burns once per year for 1/10 of that area, so essentially we cycle between all the different patches of land so that every 10 years or so there's a controlled burn that happens in those areas so it doesn't build up too much. The cost for that would be $370 million per year, which would be saving billions and billions and billions of dollars if it's able to even prevent a single fire or catastrophic fire that reaches houses. Lastly, what we can do, we can gather behind this cause and show our legislators that we want these changes to be made. And donating to this Kickstarter will help us spread the word of this movement and hopefully put an end to the catastrophic burnings that have plagued the state for so long. Thank you.